Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. Derek Chauvin sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison for the murder of George Floyd.
Or what the sentence is not based on is emotion or sympathy.
George Floyd's family speaks out, and we hear for the first time from Derek Chauvin's mother.
When you sentence my son, you will also be sentencing me.
Plus, heartbreaking testimony in the murder trial of Mark Redwine. An attorney says she gave the legal advice that allowed 13-year-old Dylan to go to his father before he was murdered.
He wanted to live with his mother.
And the former Saturday Night Live cast member pressed on the stand in the Robert Durst trial. Is the actress and comedian a key to a false alibi?
I was ashamed that, as I've said before, that I didn't appreciate the gravity of what she was saying to me.
Law&Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. And welcome everybody to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Ross in our studios in New York. Brian Buckmire is on assignment in Minneapolis for the sentencing of Derek Chauvin. And also with us here in New York, as always, co-host Terri Austin. 22 and a half years. That's the sentence Judge Peter Cahill handed down to Derek Chauvin.
The court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd.
Brian Buckmire in Minneapolis, that's 10 years more than what the guidelines would call for, but much less than what the prosecutors had asked for, 30 years.
Absolutely. Many people here, after hearing the sentence, felt that it was too low of a sentence. Many people getting angry, no violence, but just shouting in frustration that they wanted more. People were definitely asking for the 40 years, hoping that Judge Cahill will go beyond what the prosecution recommended, but many disappointed in the 22 and a half years.
Right. Well, this all came after the judge heard from George Floyd's family, starting with Floyd's now 7-year-old daughter, Gianna. She spoke about how she hopes the world remembers her father.
Well, they helped him because those mean people did something to him.
Yeah. If you could say anything to your daddy right now, what would it be?
It would be, I miss you and I love you.
I wanted to know from the man himself, why? What were you thinking? What was going through your head when you had your knee on my brother's neck? We seek the maximum penalty. We don't want to see no more slaps on the wrist.
I had a real nice sleep because of the nightmares I constantly have hearing my brother beg and plead for his life over and over again. Even saying, "They're going to kill me. Please, officer," screaming for our mom. I have had to sit through each day of Officer Derek Chauvin's trial and watch the video of George dying for hours over and over again.
And for the defense, only one person spoke on behalf of Derek Chauvin, his mother. She says her son is not a racist and that she will always love him.
My son's identity has also been reduced to that as a racist. I want this court to know that none of these things are true. Remember, there is no stronger bond or love than a mother's love. And one final thought I want you to remember. Remember, you are my favorite son.
And then finally, before he was sentenced, Derek Chauvin briefly addressed the court with a cryptic message to Floyd's family.
At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some peace of mind. Thank you.
Terri Austin, this is the first time we've heard from Derek Chauvin other than his decision not to testify. What did you make of that message he was sending, what he had to say?
You know, Brian, I think this was a missed opportunity. He spoke for less than a minute, and he made reference to these additional legal matters. We know that's the federal indictment he's talking about. And the good news is he did give the condolences to the Floyd family. That's the first thing that he should do, and he did do that. But this cryptic message, that's exactly the right word that you used, about additional comments, hoping that it would bring peace to the family. It's unclear what he meant by that. I guess he has written something that the family will eventually see, but I think it was a missed opportunity. He could have been a bit more remorseful in a statement.
Probably cold comfort for the Floyd family. Brian, what was the reaction outside the courthouse when the sentence came down for 22.5 years?
It was mixed. We had an opportunity to speak with George Floyd's girlfriend, Courtney Ross, and her reaction was that she was disappointed with the 22.5 years, but also she heard the screams and the cries for violence and outbursts and anger over the sentencing in 22.5 years and the lack of message from Derek Chauvin. And so she was asking for calm, peace, and to not take George Floyd's name in vain, so to speak, in any attacks towards violence. I do understand that Derek Chauvin didn't give more words, but I think that's because he's got litigation coming to federal court, and I think he's hinting at maybe giving more because there may be a plea deal that gets worked out soon with Derek Chauvin and the federal government where you might hear more sympathetic feedback from him.
And Brian, under Minnesota law, 22.5 years could be reduced by as much as a third, isn't that right?
It actually is absolutely going to be reduced unless he does something incorrect while incarcerated. For every 2 days he serves in jail, he gets 1 day of jail time. So 22.5 years, he'll do about 14 years in jail. He was accredited about 190 days, about 2/3 of a year for the time he already served. So he'll be in jail for about 14 years. But again, the feds are coming after him with another case, and those years will be tacked on top of any state time.
All right, so he could be out as early as age 60, depending on the federal case. Thanks much. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, behind Judge Cahill's reasoning for Derek Chauvin's sentence. Plus, a Colorado father on trial for the murder of his own son. The witness breaking down on the stand, talking about the life of Dylan Redwine and what led to his death. Welcome back. The world was watching as Judge Peter Cahill made his decision on Derek Chauvin's sentence, explaining it had nothing to do with sympathy or emotion.
I have a 22-page memorandum that is going to be attached to the sentencing order. And why am I doing it in writing? To emphasize the fact that determining the appropriate sentence in any case, and in this case, is a legal analysis. It's applying the rule of law to the facts of an individual and specific case.
In his presentation, defense attorney Eric Nelson spoke about Chauvin's service in the military, commitments to his friends and family, and says he lived an honorable life. Nelson then gave some insights into Chauvin's frame of mind.
Derek Chauvin was not even scheduled to work on May 25th, 2020. He volunteered because there was short staffing at the time. I know from numerous conversations that I've had with Derek that his brain is littered with what ifs. What if I just had not agreed to go in that day? What if things had gone differently? What if I never responded to that call? What if, what if, what if?
Prosecutors had asked for 30 years, and Assistant Minnesota Attorney General Matthew Frank even became choked up, thanking the witnesses for testifying, including members of the law enforcement community.
Under great pressure, great stress, and to some extent at peril to their
their occupations, what they've devoted their life to, stuck to their oath and their commitment as police officers to speak openly and honestly about policing and the training that is given and received by police officers. Those officers didn't hide behind a blue wall. They came forward, they told this court and those jurors.
So Brian Buckmire, Matthew Frank appeared to choke up when he spoke about this case. There were strong and raw emotions on both sides today, weren't there?
Absolutely. From the family of George Floyd and the prosecution, they spoke about how the loss of a father, a brother, just an individual affected them. And of course, like any mother would, Derek Chauvin's mother took the stand and spoke about how this was affecting her life. Now, I think it was slightly a missed opportunity not to acknowledge that the other family had literally lost someone and that she was simply going to have some difficulty in communicating with her son, while others, their son was dead. But I still think it was heartfelt on both sides, regardless of how you looked at it.
And Terri Austin, the judge expressed great sympathy to the Floyd family. Did he strike the right balance in what he said, though, about ruling out emotion and sympathy in making his decision?
Well, he was very clear he did not want any emotion or sympathy to affect the eventual sentence. He said he wanted to apply the law to the facts, and that was it. He wanted his 22-page memorandum to speak for itself. What that tells me is that he had already prepared the memorandum and he had already made his decision based on the law and the facts. So I think he struck the right balance as far as the decision was concerned. He took the guidelines and he actually added the additional 150 months based on the abuse and cruelty, and that's how he got to the 270. So that made sense to me. I do wish he had said a little more. I think people wanted to hear from him, but I guess we'll have to read the 22-page memorandum to see exactly what his thoughts were.
And Brian Buckmire, did it leave you wanting more to hear from him, too?
Absolutely. I think that he could have given a little bit more. I mean, we've seen cases like this. I think of the Botham Jean case, where the judge gave a little bit more in talking about the loss of the victim, but also the defense. I would have hoped for a little bit more than that, but as Terri said, we might have to look to that 22-page memorandum to see what his thoughts really were on the issue.
So fascinating reading for that. All right. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, more from the former SNL star on the stand in the Robert Durst trial. Plus, riveting testimony in the trial, the teenage boy found murder in Colorado, what his parents' divorce attorney had to say. That's next. Testimony in the trial of Mark Redwine has now turned to his relationship with the son he's accused of murdering and his temper. Law and Crime's Angenette Levy has the latest. Angenette?
By all accounts, Dylan Redwine did not want to visit his father over the Thanksgiving weekend in 2012. But a lawyer for Dylan's mother told the jury Dylan had no choice.
He wanted to live with his mother.
Amber Harrison represented Dylan Redwine's mother in her divorce. She testified a couple of months before Dylan disappeared. A judge granted his mother's request to move to Colorado Springs and ordered that Thanksgiving 2012 visit between Mark Redwine and Dylan.
I told her that she had to put Dylan on the plane or she would be charged with contempt of court.
Harrison also testified about what Dylan told her about his father.
He was not comfortable around his father. He disclosed to me that he had seen the pictures that creeped him out and made him feel very uncomfortable.
Mark Redwine's attorney implied that Harrison was biased and never documented Dylan's feelings about the photos.
Do you recall that one of the issues that was in contention was claims by Mr. Redwine that Elaine Hall was alienating him from Dylan?
I believe that was one of Mr. Redwine's claims, yes.
Kathy Berry, a friend of Elaine Hall's, told the jury about an encounter she and another woman had when confronting Mark Redwine about his feces fetish.
He picked up that log and he fucking like this, and all I remember was I don't know if you've ever seen the cartoon where the eyes bulge out and all you can see is the whites of the eyes, but that's all I saw.
The defense tried to discredit Barry's account.
You and Denise acknowledged that you provoked Mr. Redwine, is that right?
I believe those words came out of the mouth of Denise Hess.
And you both knew you shouldn't have provoked him, right?
I didn't know that.
And did anybody at any point ever tell you what happened was a crime?
No.
The jurors also saw a reconstruction of Mark Redwine's home that had been erected in the courthouse. Prosecutors say that that home had undergone extensive renovation following a fire, and that November 2012 visit by Dillon was his first since that work had been done. For Law&Crime Daily, I'm Angenette Levy.
Turning now to other top legal news making headlines. The Donald Trump Organization reportedly could face criminal charges. The New York Times broke the story that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has informed former President Donald Trump's lawyers that they are considering charges against the company as soon as next week. The DA's office is investigating Trump's family's business for alleged fringe benefits the company awarded to a top executive without paying taxes. The charges would be a first for the investigation into Trump and his former business dealings. When we come back, a former SNL star faces cross-examination. What she has to say about her dear friend, the murder victim, and the shame and guilt she felt from withholding information from investigators. More to come in the trial of Robert Durst. And welcome back. Continuing coverage now of the trial of real estate heir Robert Durst. We're hearing more from the former Saturday Night Live cast member Lorraine Newman. Robert Durst is accused of murdering his best friend Susan Berman in December 2000. Friends of Susan Berman have been taking the stand, but none stand out quite like Lorraine Newman. Newman is best known for her role as Connie Conehead during her tenure on SNL. On cross-examination, defense attorneys questioned Newman about Berman's dramatic tendencies and why the comedian withheld information from investigators when they first reached out to her.
It was hard to know what was true and what wasn't, correct?
There were times, yes.
And you also told Mr. Lewin that there came a point in time where Susan rescinded her story about the alibi. Remember that?
Yes.
And that means took it back. Another reason that you told Mr. Lewin you didn't tell anybody about it was because Susan was so capable of hyperbole that you didn't even know what she may or may not have told you was the truth.
I said that?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
On redirect, Newman expressed her shame to prosecutor John Lewin about withholding information.
Mr. Chesnoff asked you if in fact you had said something that you weren't really sure if you had anything valuable or substantive to offer. Do you remember that question?
Yes, I do. I was ashamed that, as I've said before, that I didn't appreciate the gravity of what she was saying to me, and that I blithely accepted her backtracking and rescinding. And it was almost like, I think I said this to you at the time, like the Kitty Genovese crime where people watched as this girl was stabbed to death and did nothing.
Returning now to the sentencing of Derek Chauvin and reaction from George Floyd's girlfriend, Courtney Ross, who talked with our Brian Buckmire outside the courthouse.
I believed that it was going to be 40. I thought he was going to do the max sentence, so I am disappointed.
But people's reaction, what did you want to say about people's reaction and what George Floyd would have wanted right now?
I will say this loud and clear. Anyone who is preaching violence, anyone who is preaching hurting other people that I have heard around here, this is the wrong place to do it. Do not do it in Floyd's name. That is not what he was ever about. He was about peace and love and inclusion and helping people.
Brian Buckmire, that was a strong message from Courtney Ross to followers of this case.
Absolutely. Courtney Ross was here even like an hour or two before the sentence was read out. And she was here playing with children. Don't forget, she's a school teacher, playing with children, talking to people. She was so happy to speak with us and so adamant that she did not want people taking George Floyd's name and using it towards violence. However, she was very reflective of the 22 and a half years and didn't feel that it was enough, but she felt it was a step forward in some way, shape, or form. But she was very adamant about this needing to be a time of reconciliation, peace, and not violence.
And Terri Austin, what's the message you think the sentencing today sends to the 3 other Minneapolis police officers who were on the scene that day?
You know, I think they have to be concerned that when their trial commences in March of 2022, they might be facing similar sentences as we saw today, especially the 2 who were involved in holding George Floyd down. So we know that Alexander King and Thomas Lane were both on the back and legs, respectively. And I think there was evidence and medical testimony about the fact that that did contribute, at least as far as being on the back, to George Floyd's death. I think Tu Tao, who was the individual who was keeping the individuals at bay and making sure they didn't interfere, I think he should be concerned as well. We might see some pleas taken here because they may really want to avoid a conviction and they may not want to be an example. And so I think there's that possibility. That's how I think the sentence will affect those cases.
So Brian Buckmire, more to come in this case. It's not quite over.
Absolutely, and don't forget there are also federal charges that are pending. Kind of got a glimpse of what may come from that cryptic message that Derek Chauvin shared with us, but also the other 3 facing their state and potential federal charges as well.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us here on Law&Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we continue to discuss justice in America.